think we are about good to go. Yay! Woohoo! Hey! Well, can I get that a little bit louder? How excited are you guys? Awesome. Great. So, welcome to the Brass Screens, Steampunk Film and Television. My name is Diana Foe. In the steampunk community, I'm also known as Alien the Peacemaker. I work for Tor Books and Tor.com, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being with some wonderful, wonderful, talented people, and they're going to talk to you about their newest projects, you know, whether it be in film, in web series, television, what have you, and why steampunk is hot in Hollywood. So, first off, I'm going to start with some introductions. Starting here, immediately to my right, we have a couple of people representing Lantern City, and you might recognize one of them.
Probably not. Hard in the mirror.
But the gentleman immediately to my right is Trevor Crafts. Trevor serves as executive producer and co-creator of Lantern City. In his 15 years in the industry, Trevor has produced everything from TV broadcasts to experimental events to Emmy Award-winning documentaries. He's acted as executive producer, writer, and director, providing a wide range of enhanced creative projects to companies and institutions like MTV, Comcast, Anthropology, NSA, and the Philadelphia Zoo. He's also a winner of 15 industry awards. Crafts won the 2009 LA TV Festival, sponsored by NAPTE and YouTube, and in 2008, the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences recognized Trevor with an Emmy Award in the documentary special category for his documentary on the 1921 Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots. And next we have, of course, Ms. Fox Wagner. With over 40 years of experience in Hollywood,
I think it's 39. Don't make it, you know.
Bruce has been involved in classic film and television series such as Tron and Tron Legacy, Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and Babylon 5. Bruce recently lent his voice talents to the hit video game Spec Ops: The Line, and he is excited to present Lantern City, a groundbreaking show in which he will serve as co-creator and executive producer. So welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
Next we have Leona Renee Huber. She is an actress, playwright, and the award-winning best-selling author of multiple Victorian Gothic fantasy series for publishers such as Tor. Her Strangely Beautiful and Magic Most Foul sagas have been translated into many languages and selected for National Book Club editions. Trained as a classical actress, Leona also worked in film and television in New York on shows like Boardwalk Empire. She loves nothing more than a finely tailored corset and a good ghost story. And last, and certainly but not least, we have Tom Trulo. Tom Trulo is a contributing artist and special consultant for House of Diggs Productions. He's also a bit of a fixer and maker himself. And at House of Diggs is in production for a TV show called The Crypto Historians, which Tom will portray El Cabo Williamson, America's quote-unquote #1 Freemason in 1893. So welcome, Tom. So now that we have our panel properly introduced, I'm actually going to start with each group talking for a little bit about what projects that they're working on. And first up, be Lantern City. So feel free to queue up your things.
Oh, we're queuing up our things. We're going to queue up things. There you go, Lantern City. We'll just take a quick look. If you've been to a panel that we've been at before, you've probably seen this. This is just a quick concept trailer. Give you a little bit of a feeling about Lantern City, its visual style, and just a sort of a quick idea about the characters. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that as soon as it plays through.
Three lives intertwined, pulled into a world none of them could have imagined. When everything you know is gone,
All I want is to wake up and know that all of this was a dream.
how far are you willing to go?
You can't stop someone who is willing to die for love.
What would you do to survive?
The greatest threat to an empire is always from within.
How much could you overcome?
I'll watch them kill themselves to get what was never theirs to have.
What will it take to escape Lantern City?
That's just a little plastic. Yeah.
As you can see, it's a comedy. It's a half hour.
So, Lantern City is really, it's a story, it's an episodic television series that focuses on really a couple of core questions. How far would you go to be with the person that you love the most, and what would you do to survive? It really is, it's a story of three people from our world that get transported to an alternate Earth and this huge, gigantic city called Lantern City. And essentially it's about their struggles to find out how they got there, find each other, and find their way home. So it's very much like a steampunk version of a Game of Thrones or a Boardwalk Empire, where you have multiple different stratas of society interacting with one another on a daily basis. There's the Grey Empire that rules all of Lantern City and all of its people, the workers, and then a new sort of class of people that live underground where there's no rules, there's no laws, you don't have to live under the yoke of the Grey Empire, but it's a very violent place, it's a very dangerous place to live. And so it's sort of this interchange of these three different social characteristics that constantly swirl through both our human characters and the alternate characters in Lantern City.
Yeah.
So, and it's a project that Bruce and I started about a year ago. We launched it at Comic-Con in
San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego.
And then Dragon Con.
And when
We've been doing a lot of conning.
cons all over the place. But one of the most important things about the show is that it really does involve the fans in development
Yeah.
of the show. So on our website, there's a place where, in the workers forum, where fans can submit their own designs and props and all the wonderful things that this amazing maker community does. And the best of the best we'll actually use on the show and highlight those artists once we go into production. So,
It has some very basic themes, other than that technical aspect. Because I'm a big believer that there are very, very rudimentary, very human themes that drive all drama, right? And at the very basis of this is a love story. Ladies, this isn't just a fanboy show with great gimmicks and flying dirigibles and ray guns with goggles. It's a much more serious attempt. I mean, when we say steampunk, I think we're not trying to as much point up a Victorian era as, I don't even know what this era is, the era of Hetra, I guess you would say.
yeah, that's
The Grey Empire era. It's not this specifically London turn of the 19th century. It's an alternate world. She would fit right here. This is one of the Grey ladies. Of the Grey
Absolutely.
Empire. I feel
Absolutely.
horribly underdressed saying this. But
I'm just here as a prop to illustrate.
And we appreciate it.
and
You're
you were
doing an
wonderful
amazing
at
job.
it. You really are. No, it's true. I think a love story, something basic as that. And how far would you go to be with someone you love? Should you have lost them? And you don't know where they are, and you have an idea. And our heroes and heroines are very believable people.
And they're people from our world, so the
Yeah.
world of Lantern City may seem normal to its citizens, but we're seeing it through the eyes of people from San Francisco, modern day San Francisco.
Yeah, it
So-
sure isn't Kansas anymore, Toto.
No.
So that type of thing. And I think those kind of stories are always universal. take a fish out of water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thing.
It's working very well with.
And the great theme too is that we know how we are. You are most of you probably New Yorkers, correct? And you know how you function. Look at this Lantern City that we just that we're in right now. You know how you are as New Yorkers. Your everyday life, your everyday rituals you do in your life. What if suddenly you were thrown into another another world? Now is that you know who yourself
like this on screen?
Yeah, you
so
know yourself here, but is this your true self here? What you're going to find out is if you're thrown into something so unlike anything you've ever experienced, maybe that's going to be your real true self, if that makes any sense.
I mean, this is that
how you survive that, how you cope with it. You have nothing to draw on your past.
This is one of the street scenes from Lantern City, so it's a very gritty, dirty,
down below
urban
you
scene.
You down there, lady. I'm sorry.
And on the next shot here that we have, this is another one of our concept illustrations, again of the cityscape. There we go. So again, very heavily polluted city. It's multiple cities that have sort of come together to create this fantastic new world. And we've been to a lot of places in television. We've been to Under the Sea, we've been outer space, and to a space station named Babylon 5, and these kinds of things. Were you there? No, I didn't think so.
I was just going to say that little figure up there, that's me. Right up there. See that guy standing there?
On the right.
Yeah.
But it's a place that we haven't been, television audiences haven't been to a steampunk world, a steampunk universe, or a place with steampunk ideals. And one of the things that we did to introduce this world is right now on Amazon, we have our first illustrated novel called Rise, and written by Matthew James Daly, who is our writer of the show, along with Bruce and myself. And we had Section Studio create all of the, yes, Diana has here a copy of Rise.
Yes.
Beautifully illustrated with 26 illustrations by the same studio that did our development work for the television show Section Studios out in LA. So this takes place 125 years before the television series. So it really goes over the creator of Lantern City, Isaac Foster Gray, who becomes the first leader of the Gray Empire. So it's it's a way that we can, as we're continuing to develop the television show, we can have everybody start to learn about the show and get engaged with some real content. And we've had a lot of great new developments on the show that we'll be able to talk a little bit more about when I.
You want to mention?
We'll do it. Yeah, we'll do it on Saturday. We're going to get our final confirmations on Friday, and then we'll do some good announcements on Saturday as well at our panel. So.
Great, thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Can I just add something real quick?
Sure.
Well, thank you, moderator.
Yes.
I think steampunk is coming. I mean, Hollywood has had it. We've had League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We've had, you name it. On television, I think Castle has dabbled with it. Warehouse 13, is that right? Yeah, Warehouse 13. But they haven't really created another world with it, an alternate world with it. And that's our attempt, that's our ambition to do here. Because I think steampunk is a very, it's up to your interpretation of it. I don't think there's any set rules, right?
No, that's a strength.
That's why we like it.
Yeah.
It's open to your interpretation of it. So, and this, as you'll find out, is ours.
Fantastic. And so,
There you go.
Next, we actually have Tom Shula. He's going to talk about the crypto historians. So I just queued up your videos, hopefully.
Do you think we should start with the video, or?
Oh, it's your choice.
This is Jimmy Diggs introducing his own creation. I think that's probably the most prudent way to introduce this.
All right.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Diggs. I'm the creator of a new steampunk series called The Crypto Historians. I'm talking to you now from the historic B-17 bomber, the Memphis Belle, to introduce you to a new and exciting idea. The men and women that fly and maintain this magnificent bird of war have a motto: take a flight into history. The Crypto Historians is a time travel series that invites you to take a flight into the future as well as the past. But it's far more than just a time travel series. The Crypto Historians is a build-your-own adventure series. In The Crypto Historians, you will decide how the future unfolds. You will decide the course of the story. Kill the villain or let him live. You decide. Steal the spaceship or blow it up. You decide. Or view the entire story from the perspective of the villain. After all, you know what they say. There's more than one side to every story. In The Crypto Historians, the future truly is in your hands. And the future sure don't look like it used to.
And one of the things when we get our time machine working properly is to go back and change the obvious ripoff to the Back to the Future music for that. But the stories that Jimmy's looking for are not the Nikola Tesla, not the H.G. Wells stories that are catered to the sort of everyone knows of steampunk. He's looking for Eugene Jacques Ballard, who was an American, African American, who was a pilot with the French in World War I, actually, who in this is played by Tim Russ. And one of the things Jimmy's introduction pointed to is that you're going to be deciding how the story goes. If you want to see Tim Russ as Eugene Jacques Ballard kill Will Wheaton 7 or 8 different ways, we can make that happen. He didn't really explain who the main villain is in this piece set between 1893 and World War II. All throughout that main period of this time travel story, the Martians are trying to take over. And that's going to be another big element of the series. You can actually watch the entire thing where the Martians are the heroes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. And next we have Leanna.
Yes.
Hi. So I am an author who has a background in theater. So I left theater to pursue writing my novels. And then theater and film just kind of sucked me back in. So as an author, I write Gothic Victorian fantasy. I write gas lamp fantasy. So definitely I'm under the steampunk umbrella. So in this vein, I've networked with a lot of various writers. And one of them approached me, a good friend of mine approached me at a book convention earlier last year and said, I'm working on this film that has a lot of themes like what you write in your books. And I know you're an actress, and would this be something you're interested in? So she, Delilah Marvell, who's a wonderful historical author, is the screenwriter for the project I'm working on, Obolos. And she said, well, it's basically Orpheus and Eurydice, only it's a 9-year-old boy going into the underworld to rescue his dead mother. So I thought, that's an interesting turn on a classic tale. And one of my favorite movies is Pan's Labyrinth, one of my absolute amazing film. So any of those themes that deal with these journeys into the underworld, my first series is an allusion to Persephone and Hades. So for me, this definitely was the idea of dealing with an underworld story in any way, of course, piqued my interest. So Obolos, the title of Obolos comes from obol, which is in Greek mythology, that's the coin that you pay to the ferryman to be able to cross the river of the dead. And in this particular series, in this particular film rather, so this will be a short film. It's in pre-production right now, and it's going to be filming in 2014 and hitting the festival circuits by 2015. So in this short film, you're dealing with a modern world as we know it today, and then the underworld is a steampunk, slightly dystopian, slightly new Victorian and mythic other world. So you've got a parallel world. So you kind of have a sense of this. When I first saw this photo, or this concept art, I was like, oh yes, I'm on board. if that's the Cerberus that you're dealing with, I'm definitely on board for this. So beautiful concept art that they have. Really wonderful writers are working on the project. So you have Shane Phillips and Cale Henderson had approached Delilah Marvell about working on this, and then she ended up working on the screenplay as well. So you've got several different historical authors who are working with this, all of us that have theater in our backgrounds too. So you've got a lot of multidisciplinary artists working on this, and we're very, very excited about it. I'm definitely interested in how steampunk is not a limiting world. It is something that completely can reinvent and give you these scapes. And what I love is that I think in a lot of our cases, not only are we dealing with some historical aspects, but also some dystopian aspects as well, and some post-apocalyptic as well. And so this retro futurism is so fascinating to me, because it's you've got these elements that are entwining from all these different traditions, and because of that, that's really indicative of the world that we're in right now, where we do have a lot of interweaving threads between technology and then people rebelling against it, a lot of people wanting to kind of go back to simpler times, the do-it-yourself movement, craftspeople, artisans, makers, all of us, and the interdisciplinary aspects of what steampunk can bring in art, in film, in music. That's what drew me into the community as an author, and I found such a wonderful home there, and I'm so thrilled to be able to kind of then, dabble into my other love, which is theater and acting. So I'll be thrilled to be on board with this project, and also then just talking about it in the steampunk community as well. Thematically, I think it really falls in line with a lot of these sort of mythic and epic quests that steampunk is really, really good with dealing with, because you've got these unanswered questions that history has always kind of given us, but here in this case we can start to rewrite some of that sense of history. And so that, for me, is what keeps it really interesting. I'm not interested in writing historical fiction because history is this thing that happened then. History is constantly being rewritten. History is constantly being rediscovered. We are learning stories from people whose views as minorities or as women were suppressed for so many years. So that's really, for me, what makes this so, so vital. And this steampunk as a genre is so important, is because we can reinvent and retell and bring these things to life and do it in a new way, do it in our way with our own modern technology, with an eye for respect and an eye for interest, and all of these things that we can make new, we can rebirth them kind of like a phoenix.
Wow. And actually, I think you just totally answered my next question. But I will have other panelists contribute their thoughts too. And my question actually is that steampunk, as we know, is a highly visual subculture, which is why it's so appealing to film and television. But why do you think the public is so attracted to the steampunk aesthetic right now? Does anyone else on the panel have some thoughts?
I'll take a stab at it. I think that one of the things that's interesting about, it is, you just said cell phones, is that everything in our society right now is almost instantaneous. I mean, if I need to know, who starred in Scarecrow and Mrs. King, please, I can,
Kate Jackson.
Exactly, Kate Jackson. But I mean, it's, you can just pull out your phone, and almost everybody has smartphones, and you can find the information instantaneously. And there's no waiting anymore for pretty much anything. We all have broadband, we all have on-demand television, TV itself is changing, and it's becoming more like reading a novel, where you can pick it up and put it down whenever you have time. And I think that's one of the things that is interesting, because steampunk isn't fast. The creation of it isn't fast. It goes back to a time, in terms of a visual aspect, where everything had some artistic value to it. Even a sewing machine was gorgeous and had a lot of beautiful detailing and scroll work. And we're very utilitarian now. I mean, Apple does a great job at doing very minimalist designs and minimalist treatments and simple. And pretty soon we're all going to be living in the movie Oblivion, and we're looking like Tom Cruise. So, but
I'm taller.
That's true by a lot. But I think that's one of the things that it draws people to it, is that it harkens back to this craftsmanship style that we all at one point in time in our history were involved in, we're part of. And I think that's something that, as a maker, as a creator, as an artist. It's very interesting, I think, for a lot of people to be able to hook into that, and it just looks really cool.
Yeah, I agree on that one aspect that, here's the iPhone. Everything we have today, modern architecture, I'm lost on. I don't understand it. It looks like, everything is smooth, everything is utilitarian, like you said. I just got back from the UK, and there's so much of it. I mean, London. I want to tell you, you're standing there at the Tower of London, you're looking across, and there's this glass city. You have the 1400s, the 1200s on one side of the Thames River, and then you have this modern metropolis on the other side, modern London. And it just struck me the differences in the architecture. I understand those beautiful designs, those shapes of those buildings, they're super futuristic. But the care you could see that was taken in building the average house, the average everything, with gargoyles and figurines and everything. It's just amazing, and that to me is what attracts me to steampunk before I even knew the word steampunk, the phrase. And my good friend K.W. Jeter is the man who coined that phrase, as opposed to cyberpunk. Anyway, that's what I mean. I'm just expounding on your thing there. That I'm attracted by this detail. It's very attractive too. You know what I'm saying? It was a different skills. Everything was artistic.
I think it combines the desire for a sense of pride, an understanding of provenance, and exactly the setting that you were pointing to of we have some catastrophically challenging things in front of us, and we're trying to confront them out of a disposable culture.
Yeah.
So
steampunk wasn't a disposable culture.
No, it was not,
It was made to last.
and that's why it's popular now, because it grows out of cyberpunk authors looking to give it more of a backstory, figuring out that no, we didn't invent sex, that it actually did exist before this, and pitched to a generation of people who've always been told the virtue of their individuality. So if you put all of those things in a pot, that's how you wind up with it being expressed through DIY.
But you can also see it moving, the gears, and
Right.
that's what we're fascinated with. I can't see anything in here.
Okay,
So it pops up, but you don't see how it's working.
Right.
How does it get there?
Not unless there's a real problem.
Yeah. And I can see very little.
Then what you see is a spinning rainbow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I think that's part of the fascination.
Absolutely. So you're adding accessibility to it.
I think too, one of the things that's interesting, I find, I do a lot of steampunk conventions, and both in steampunk and in neo-Victoriana, the interest there's a huge interest in the occult, because the Victorians were obsessed with the occult. They were obsessed with death and with dying and with the death culture. We don't have a death culture anymore. The Victorians had an elaborate mourning system. So, and this appeals to me, as all of my books deal with elaborate. I mean, I'm always dressed in Victorian mourning. Exactly, always. You will always know I'm always the woman in black. And so for me, I'm fascinated with this because we don't have it today. So, like as a lifelong goth girl, it's not a phase. This is one of those things where I'm interested in, how do we now encounter the death culture, which I think is largely absent, and what can we learn from the Victorians about how they lived and loved and died and celebrated death in sometimes fantastically creepy, morbid ways. I mean, Victorian hair jewelry is something I'm very obsessed with and I'm fascinated by.
And it's squeaky.
And it's, I know, and then they put molars into in brooches and stuff, and it's amazing. So I think for me that idea of preservation too, the idea of not only were things built to last, but people were built to last. Monuments, if you go into the garden style cemetery, all the beautiful cemeteries of the world were Victorian inventions. Here in New York we have two of the most amazing garden style cemeteries in the country, in Greenwood and Woodlawn. Early 1830s roughly. So that for me too is not only is it about the things, but it's also then about the people. And so for me, obviously, with Obolus, I'm so interested in that idea of how dealing with the underworld in the death culture in all of that. How does that then rub against this age that wants to just continually move on and move on?
Great. So for our next series of questions, I have individual questions for each of your projects. And so I'll start with Lantern City. You know, part of it starts off in the real world, but then it goes into this secondary, like, alternate universe. And so what I'm interested in is what historical aspects, if any, from our world was part of your inspiration in creating the world of Lantern City? And how does that affect the characters that enter into it?
Well, good question. Essentially, we have created an alternate Earth that runs at a different time pace. It has familiar elements for all of us as viewers, but it definitely has its own entirely unique timeline, history, political system, social caste system, even down to flora and fauna that have developed on their own track in Hetero, which is the alternate Earth for Lantern City. So there's going to be a lot of familiar elements because humans are essentially the same. There's no special powers, there's no supernatural elements in Lantern City. It's really science, politics, and technology based. But in terms of the visual references, so that we can all sort of experience it, I think in working with Section Studios, Bruce and Matt and I really leaned on them heavily to take aspects of things that we know, like Victorian architecture, and twist it on its end. So I remember when they were developing the movie Treasure Planet, which had a lot of great visuals, they used sort of a 70-30 rule, where they had 70% of it was something that you recognized, and 30% of it was something that was twisted in a good way. Looks like a big sailing ship, except it's got solar sails and jets on the back, and I love that movie. But I mean, it's I think that's really a way that we've looked at it also, is taking elements that we know and expanding them a bit more, and pulling from architecture, art, costume design, clothing design. A lot of it pulls from that 19th century Victorian period of time. So we're not really going any further into a sort of more diesel punk area, really. And Rise, it's interesting because Rise sort of tries to explore what happened 100 years before steampunk started. So it's sort of it's proto feudal. Yeah, feudal steampunk or proto steampunk. So yeah.
Great. Or like punk, to say?
A little bit more, yeah, a little bit more like that, yeah.
Spartacus punk.
You just coined a new phrase. Good job.
Feudal punk.
That's good. Feudal punk is good.
I'm full of phrases.
Thanks, everybody. No.
Feudal punk. I like that. Feudal punk. It starts off feudal punk and we end up in steampunk. And we're close. 10 seasons later, we're in diesel punk. We can punk it all.
Yeah. So my next question is for Tom and the historians. So, and I find that it's a different take on steampunk because it has to do with time travel. And what I find interesting is that there's a big emphasis on these are actually people who had lived. These are real historical characters. This really happened in history. And how does that approach influence the creative process that you guys have developed with the crypto historians?
It starts precisely with that, exactly what kind of talent Jimmy's looking for. He wanted to know something about Masons, so he contacted me. And then based on him having assumed that research might take 3 months, and it only having taken 5 minutes, and the fact that I looked like the guy, the chief Mason in the United States in 1893, he said, the role's yours if you want it. If Jimmy wasn't looking for these profoundly less well-known stories, that he would never have contacted me. I'll give you an example of one thing I was on the phone with him about 2 hours ago. This is the first time I've had to worry about spoilers, so I apologize if I totally screw this up. One of the stories that he asked me for, if he could use after I told him, he said, what do you know about the War of the Worlds broadcast in 1938? And I said, well, my grandmother was a telephone operator on that day. So she was getting calls about, what do you know about the Martians? Who should I contact? Do I need to call the police? Should I get in touch with my doctor? Before the authorities were. And so back in 1938, you weren't allowed to have a radio on behind you when you were running the phones. So she knew nothing. She knew what the audience was telling her. And then, now keep in mind, this isn't a period when women did not usually have jobs. So she took the rules very seriously, and probably spent a long time figuring out, should I call my mother? Because if this is the end of the world, that's the last voice I want to hear. My great-grandmother walked to her daughter's place of work, carrying a gigantic flashlight, ready to fight the Martians on the last day of Earth. Jimmy said, I'm not changing anything. I love that story. I want to tell that story. Can I use it when we get to World War II? I said, absolutely. So that's crypto historians' approach. Everyone has stories like that. Absolutely everyone. Ask your grandparents if they're still around. They'll tell you. And they might be crypto historian stories.
Wow.
Thank you.
And so, Leanna, unlike an alternate universe or actual history, Abolos takes a mythological take on it. So I was curious, what do you think a steampunk interpretation adds to classical pieces like mythology, and why do you think people are interested in combining them both?
I think that any kind of mythology is a template for all of our stories anyway. And so, we're all recreating the same stories. I mean, I'm on to my 8th novel, and I'm not reinventing the wheel every time. I'm doing classic mythic epic quest stories in all of my books, and so that appeals to us regardless. I think the idea of the different kinds of elements that you can use, the elemental ideas. I mean, I think that there's a very there's an interesting fine line between steampunk and dystopian. It's this interesting thing where not everything is completely adding up. And I think that's where, like, if you're going into an alternate world, you can make it as alternate as you want. And I think adding in the steampunk elements, kind of like you talked about with the 70-30, it's like you want to have some of these elements that are familiar, but then unfamiliar. And what is more unnerving than something that's almost like what you know, but it's not what you know? Yeah. And I think that is actually a lot more compelling than completely going down the rabbit hole and seeing nothing remotely familiar. I think it's having your perception twisted, and I think that steampunk can do that because it's using familiar things, items. We understand clocks, we understand gears, we know how that works. You put them into this other context, and then suddenly everything isn't exactly as it seems, and yet it's familiar but not. And so it's that slight disconnect that I think provides that sort of off balance for the characters when they're going into these other worlds. One of my favorite theater directors, Anne Bogart, said, the most interesting thing about watching an actor is if you push them off balance for them to regain balance. It's that regaining the balance that's the most fascinating thing to watch on stage. And I think that for any of us involved in the great genre of fantasy in general, is that idea of what happens when the world is slightly twisted on its side. And I think that the steampunk elements provided to something familiar, like mythology, adds to that sense of real escapism into this other place, just on a visual sense. Plus, come on, it just looks cool.
That's true.
And a question for the entire panel, since all of you guys are involved in the industry, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone, whether they want to be a filmmaker, a writer, an actor, a prop maker, what one piece of advice would you give to them starting out in the industry?
Can I do 2?
Sure, if they're short.
It is short. Don't be afraid to say yes, and don't kid yourself. It is work.
Oh, it is that, yeah. In general?
Yeah, in general, for someone starting out.
In business? There's so many, it's hard to narrow it down to one. Other than it has to be an all-consuming ambition of yours, because everyone will tell you you'll never make it.
Right.
Everyone will tell you you'll never make it. Even your teachers. I went to drama school and I was being taught by failed actors. And somehow their failure seeped through their lessons. Seriously.
That's disgusting.
And oops, got a lot of wires going here. See, if this was steampunk, we wouldn't have all this stuff here. But I'd have a megaphone talking to you. I just think it's something you need. You have to find what is your voice. What is your, oh God, what is it? Your ideal, for want of a better word. What do you see? What is your expression? What is it you want to express? And you have to sort of define that defines you. Does that make any sense to you? Find your voice, I guess, and stick to it. And if it has some worth, it's going to show. But like I said, this is a town. I started in this town in 1972. I was on Broadway very briefly. I learned my first real lesson as an actor. Everyone told me, kid, you're going to be a big star. You don't sign anything less than a year contract. We took this play from the Kennedy Center, Arena Stage in Washington to Chicago, and finally came to Broadway with it. It was a huge success everywhere, but it came to Broadway, the Big Apple, and we lasted our opening night.
Wow.
Out-of-town tryouts in New Jersey, wherever it was, destined to be a big hit. At showbiz, it was my first big lesson because I was the lead in this thing with another young guy that started on a show called Cheers, Ted Danson. He was a nobody hitting around this town. This is a tough town. What's that lyric? If you can't make it here, you can't make it anywhere, right? If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere in New York. I like the first one better. I like the first one better. But anyway, that's, you know, and there I was, suddenly out in the street again. A show I'd been in over a year, successfully. But New York said no. It's a tough thing, but I'm glad I got it. Because I could have gone home, but I didn't. And I said, I'll be damned if they're going to beat me. And I kept going, you know. But I think that's what it is, tenacity. But finding that thing that you believe in yourself, and it is believing in yourself. Some people call it ego. Big egos, you got to have an ego, right? Anyway, I don't know if that answers any of it. But, you know, you get some hard knocks, and you got to keep going. But show business is full of them. What? What do you want?
Did you want the rest of the time?
No.
Anyway, so mine's actually, I'm going to pull from another famous creator of worlds, Walt Disney, and I will say, keep moving forward. That's my advice, because it from a lot of what Bruce said, and Tom, it's you do have to have a steel will, and anything that you're doing, you have to keep doing it. Unfortunately, our writer, Matt Daly, couldn't attend the panel today due to some last-minute circumstances, but his advice to writers is always write. And it sounds stupid, but Matt writes every single day. When he's not working on Lantern City, he's writing something else. He's doing a screenplay. He's writing something of his own. It's like time with the tools, being a cake decorator. The reason why when I decorate a cake, it looks like crap is because I don't do flowers 200 times a day, every day. Hone your craft, create something, do every single day what it is that you want to do. That's really, I think, the key. And to Bruce, what he said also, make sure that you have your own internal beliefs and you stick to them, because great ideas are phenomenal, but execution is equally as important. So, Madam?
I think that your desire for seeing your art in the world has to outmatch the paralyzing fear of this industry in all aspects of this industry. This industry will just make you terrified. It's not sustainable often. it doesn't necessarily pay well. There's ups and downs. Your first publisher can fold, and you've just come out with your first 3 books, and they're suddenly out of print, as it was in my case. And just right out of the gate, and you think that your career is over, and then, you know, if you just keep going, you're going to find somebody, hopefully, thank God, Tor, will pick you up, and thank you, and send you on your way. But it is perseverance, and it is that tenacity, and none of us can let the fear take over. You have to want your stuff out there more, and I'm not diminishing the fear. The fear is big, and if you know that the fear is big going in, then you just make that desire outmatch it, outpace it every single time, and do whatever you have to do to trick your mind, and then just, you know, dig your heels in and try. I mean, I didn't really start writing steampunk because it was trendy. I didn't know what it was, really. I just was writing the stories that I wanted to read, and then thankfully they fit into a niche at some point, and so I'm just carving out my little niche over here. So I think all of us, just as repeating everything that's been said, like staying true to your voice, finding what it is that you have to say. What can you say that no one else in this world can possibly say?
And also, I just would add, the 4 of us are saying essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, you know, it's like, just find a great agent, or, you know, buy your way in. I mean, that's really expensive, by the way. But I mean, you know, it's something that we all have experienced, and it's also a waiting game. The industry is specifically designed to keep out people that are no good. And if you can, Frank Herbert, I'm rereading Dune again because I picked it up, and he submitted that to 20 different publishers. It took him 5 years to write, and now it's got a bajillion different books, and his son picked up the mantle, and they're still publishing them. Tor published all of them, and, you know, I mean, so I think it's just it's perseverance. And that's a really important part of being creative. You know, your voice, your execution, and your perseverance.
And you know, we have to take that, Trevor and I, because we have a project we firmly believe in. We have a script we firmly believe in. We have a concept. I can't tell you how many people are not interested. You know, they're just not interested. It's not what NBC is doing or whomever at the time in television. I believe it is, because I think I look at what HBO and the rest of them are doing now. Even what we say, the old 3 networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, we're discovering fairy tales and sort of this thing, and a new spin on that. But we have to believe in our concept, because we know, and we do know from experience already, somebody was just not quite interested, right?
One
take
person.
that rejection.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
But no one wanted Star Wars either.
Yes, and look
It
what
went
happened.
through every studio in Hollywood. If it wasn't for a guy named Zanuck Jr., who said, I'm going to take a chance on it, an ailing studio called 20th Century Fox, we got it. And now Disney's going to do it. And,
That's a great response from everyone. Thank you so much. And as a final question to the panel, just to piggyback on your last comment, Bruce, you know, where do you see steampunk going in the next 5 years?
well, I hope it's going to Lantern City.
And crypto historians.
When the man on the street says, what is this steampunk? And he goes, oh, it's that TV show. I don't know. I just think I'm seeing it everywhere now. I saw it at the conventions. I didn't know really what it was, but I liked what I saw. I'm a history buff. I love that era, especially not being in the UK. You know, Victoria is on everything. Her face is on everything. That magnificent statue in front of Buckingham Palace. But you know, it just, there's something about it that's magical to me, and it's hard to articulate. You do it much better. That's what you do. No, that's your strong suit. You were right. 10 seconds, yes, 10 minutes. I'm sorry. But I just think, where is it going? I think it's just going to become more mainstream. I still think, despite all of you here in this room, if we went out on the average street, let's go down 10 blocks from here, and say, walk up to the average person, what is steampunk? They will look at you like, get out of here, buddy. What? You know, they don't know what it is. Let's try to define that. And that's what we're all trying to do, and bring it to mainstream.
I think, obviously we've seen it in fashion. We're seeing it more even in music videos. I think Justin Bieber even had some steampunk. We all felt that way, but
every movement has setbacks.
Net positive. But I think that I saw an article recently, I think that somebody said that steampunk's already jumped the shark. And I don't really see how that's possible based on the fact that it has no media yet. I mean, it's sort of, we're seeing it as a cultural movement, and it's never been done before. I don't think we've ever seen a fan base begin a TV project or a film project or something like that. It's always, there's in Dragon Con, there's a huge parade of stormtroopers. Well, that came from the movie first. I think that's what's so interesting about the steampunk, maker community, is that they really are shaping things. So in 5 years, I think you're going to see whoever is able to finally lock into that perfect formula and have a true steampunk show. We hope it's us, but we support everybody that's also striving towards those same goals. It's really trying to find that vehicle. I think that vehicle is then going to sort of determine where it goes from there.
The last panel we were on, I was amazed. I said, "This is good." There's other projects out there.
Yeah, with Jimmy. Yeah, when we were in Chicago. Yeah.
And that other fellow was
Mark.
Steve. Mark. Yeah, Mark. But I'm saying that's good. We're on to something.
I think so. And steampunk, I think where it's going depends on who's inspired and to what. And so long as it resists someone telling you what steampunk is, it has a brilliant future. And how long that goes is how many people we inspire and then you inspire to join it. Because where it's going after that is the time capsule that will define it as folk art.
Yeah. I think that, steampunk won't survive if it's just slap a gear on it and call it steampunk.
Oh, I hate that.
We see, yeah.
Wait a minute, that's not steampunk?
No, it's not.
So, yeah. That's like the new Joss Whedon thing of like, why are you writing strong women? Because you're still asking that question. It's because of that with the goggles. It's because you're still asking that question.
Come on, I know better than that.
But I think as long as we're still telling good stories, as long as we are really, really, really trying to make sure that it doesn't only become an aesthetic movement. I mean, granted, don't get me wrong, part of the reason why I went into this career was to have an excuse to dress like this every day. But like it has to be beyond that. There has to be something, it can't just be a shell. There has to be that, an underlying core of a passion for good stories, creatively told, with this passion for the working inner parts, with all the little details. And I'm just crossing my fingers because when I sat down with my editor at Tor and I said, please don't make me leave the 19th century. I don't understand anything past 1890. Please don't. So, and thankfully she's allowed me to stay. So I think as long as there's interest in looking back to see where we're going, I think we're going to be fine, and I think we're going to be good. And so it really is up to us, though. I think, just like you said, this is a ground-up movement with steampunk, and so that is then, there is ownership that you have here that is unprecedented in ownership of other fandoms and other art and other multimedia creations. Yeah. And so you see so many things bubbling up. So please try to support those things. Retweet other people's Kickstarters. Whatever that is, just try and take ownership of it, because if you love it, you can be a part of making sure that it will be around for all of us to continue working in it.
Hear, hear.
Yay, mutual support. We have a couple of minutes left, so we probably have time for we have 5 minutes. So we literally probably have time for 1 or 2 quick questions if anyone in the audience has them. So gentleman in the red shirt.
Right. You were talking about the design base of why do we all like steampunk if it's something permanent and it's something that has fine detail and fine craft. And how do you explain things like Dragon City, as I understand it from the gist, that subculture maybe autumn doodle.
Yeah, the underground.
For those who would not, who would be in that world, who would be the ones that can't afford or wouldn't have time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about Lantern City is there are these three strata of society. So we can have Victorian finery in the Grey Empire, and we can have sort of that mechanic punk kind of feel with the workers. And the underground is one of my favorite places visually because it's really sort of steampunk robotic piratery. I mean, it's basically anything they can get their hands on from, slapped together. It's that real gritty robotic steampunk.
Taking the cast off things and making stuff.
Yeah, and turning it into, it's the recycled world down there. So, and that goes everywhere from clothing to weaponry to, to medical devices and everything in between. So, that world is a very visually dynamic place because it pulls from absolutely anything you can get your hands on to package something together to be useful.
That's what I love about steampunk is the class fluidity.
Yeah.
Because, yes, I mean, I'm not actually an aristocrat, but, but I can dress in finery and pretend to be one. And then the next day I could be a mechanic. And that type of class fluidity was not seen historically. And that's one of the things that I think is really, really cool about steampunk, because here in this country, we don't have a very good class consciousness at all. And so I think that steampunk can really raise some of those questions fascinatingly. So.
Great. We have time for one more question. Yes, you by the projector.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that fans would be able to submit written designs to the show. How would that work?
So essentially, we're not, the artists retain all the rights to the show. I like to think of Lantern City like a huge multinational gallery of steampunk art. So you go to lanterncitytv.com. You can also get there through the Facebook page, Facebook.com/LanternCityTV, and go to the Workers Forum. And you'll see we have about 30,000 members, and you'll see hundreds of different designs as people submit photographs of their props or costume sketches, all that kind of stuff. Artists retain all the rights to their own work, and we just show them and use them in different scenes in the show when we produce. So it's a great way for a new maker or new designer to come up with a great idea and have 6 million people see it at once. Yeah, and a showcase. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Throughout the panel, I want to thank everyone for coming in and sharing their creative projects today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I would like to, thank the audience. Thank you for filling up the room.
Please. Yes.
And finally, if people want to plug, where to find more information about their work, feel free to go ahead. I know you just mentioned your website. Anything else?
Also, you can get a copy of Rise, the prequel novel, on Amazon. And just do a search for Lantern City, and it'll pop right up, Lantern City Rise.
I have cards up here if anyone wants. They also have the Facebook page for Obolos, which is Obolos Film. So Facebook.com/Obolos, OBOLOS Film. And so feel free to come up and get a card. I'm at LeannaReneeHeber.com.
CryptoHistorians.com. There's a Kickstarter there. If you cannot remember Crypto Historians and you remember that I spell Tom with an H, Tom Truelove on Facebook is an easy way to get to that too. We want stories.
And again, my name is Diana Foe. I'm also known as Alien the Peacemaker. You can find my stuff at Tor.com. And also, I have tons of postcards for a couple of other projects from creators that couldn't be here today. So feel free to come up, take some goodies, take some swag, talk to us. And again, thank you so much for coming.